Hey everybody, it's Peter, and this is the 2025 Kawasaki Ninja 650, and I'm filming here at Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals, Jim Gilbert Power Sports, and there's a lot to talk about on this bike, even though it's basically carryover from before, because we have to compare the 2025 model with what's out in 2025, but we also have to dispel some of the myths that are going on that say, hey, the newest and latest and greatest is better than this. Because let's be honest, this hasn't had a ton of changes in the past little while, other than colors. We'll talk about the colors in just one second. But I do still think this is a very good bike to buy for the target market. And we're gonna talk about sort of how you can tell if the video is skewing you to their biases or your bias. You want to make sure you buy the right bike for you, and this one might just be that. So again, I want to thank Jim Gilbert's Power Sports, Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals. This is the #1 volume Kawasaki dealer in the country, and there are Kawasaki bikes as far as I can see that way, and it's like a long ways. There's Kawasaki bikes filling this area here. There's bikes everywhere, and it's still January in Canada, and they've got the bikes out here ready for you. So there's still a 2024 if you're looking at 2024s here, but 2025 is what we're going to focus on today. So let's get going with this review. So basically the only thing new for 2025 is the color schemes. This one films great. It's a bright orange, it's got some black in there, and it's got some royal purple in here. So really cool look for those of you who say, I don't want that Kawasaki green. This thing doesn't look at all like Kawasaki green. There is another color that I think is my favorite. We're gonna show you that a little bit later in the video. It's kind of a sort of a dark metallic green. It looks really good in person, but on the website it just looks like a black bike, and that may be kind of the charm of it. It looks black as well. So there's some cool colors to talk about. Like I said, we'll cover those for you in a second when we get closer in on the bike. But let's talk about why this bike becomes sort of difficult for some people to buy. First of all, it's not a 270-degree crank like some of its 2025 competitors. That can create a more unique sound. A lot of people like that, but it doesn't have that. Second of all, it's been out for a little while. It runs the same engine, and some bikes in this class have moved to that 700-ish or at least 650 plus, and they call them 700s, and some have even moved closer to 800 cc's. Now that does two things. One, it gives you more top-end power. It also makes the bikes cost more, and in this area, it makes the bikes a little bit more to insure. If that's your thing, absolutely go for it. What I think the problem is with this bike is a lot of people who do reviews on YouTube and do reviews in magazines and other stuff, they like the newest, the latest, the greatest. They like the sport bike that feels like the track bike. Even if you're a rider who will never take it to the track, they like what they like, and you have to decide what you like. I drove a bike like this. It was actually the Versa 650, but same engine in this back as a 2016 model. So this engine's been around for a while, but what it does and what I've said in the past is it's really the perfect street sport bike engine. It does everything you want it to do. It's not too powerful that it gets you in crazy trouble, but keep in mind the Ninja 500 0 to 60 time is quicker than almost everything on the road, and this one's got more power than that. So you're already dealing with all the power you want, but it's controllable. And it's kind of like the difference between driving a Porsche Cayman or something like that versus driving an absolutely ludicrous, 2,000 horsepower or something or other. Sometimes having that 300-400 horsepower in a car makes it easier to control than having 1,200 horsepower. And it's the same thing with this. You have a situation where you've got the perfect amount of power to absolutely flog, to whip through the gears, not be crazy illegal, but if you want to be illegal, you can. It's one of the strengths with this, but there's more to that in this bike, so let's go through it bit by bit. So I always say, if you've seen my reviews before, you know I love to start at the front tire, front wheel area, because it really tells you the manufacturer's intent for the bike. And what you see here is a lot of familiar stuff. You don't have any crazy suspension, not upside down suspension or anything like that. It's a standard type suspension, right side up suspension, and it's got a standard kind of brake mounting. Sometimes you'll have radial mount calipers on the higher end bikes in the class. That costs more, and in theory it gives you a stiffer stopping power. However, at this class, at the speed you're going to be driving, at the class of rider that's going to be riding this bike, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between that. It's purely a styling exercise to have brake calipers that essentially mount like that in a different arrangement here. So you've got a really typical thing. Now, one thing Kawasaki has done is they've moved away from these pedal style rotors on some of their redesigned bikes. This one still has that. Again, they haven't changed this, and the reality is it works. It works very well on this bike. There's dual calipers here. It is an ABS bike, so front and rear ABS, so you've got good control, good stopping power. And then the nice thing here is you have a little bit of a step up, even within the Kawasaki lineup on the tires. This is a Road Sport 2 tire. There are Z900 RS, which is a 4-cylinder 950cc bike instead of a 2-cylinder 650cc bike like this, that is still sold with the lower step of Dunlop tire, even though you could argue it's, you know, in need of a better tire than that. So decent Road Sport 2 tires here. Again, you can always upgrade or do whatever you want with them in the future, but not too bad. And again, so what you're doing here is trying to hit a relatively good price point while giving great on-road performance. To me, I wouldn't take this as a track bike. You know, it's perfectly fine to try as a track bike, but it's a really designed for being on-road, and it's kind of the perfect mix for on-road suspension tuning, on-road tires, everything else, but also very good stopping power for what it is. Let's move our way back and talk about the engine. So taking a look at the heart of the bike here, again, a lot of it is covered by fairings. We're going to talk about those fairings in a second because they do offer a little bit of wind protection, a little bit of aerodynamics, which makes it feel pretty fun. Underneath here, 2-cylinder, so twin cylinder, 649cc. This bike has been, or this engine has been around for a while. A lot of motorcycles have engines that have been around for a while, and what it does is it offers you great reliability. That's a big piece of owning a bike. The other thing it does is it's a great street engine. So what the biggest difference is, it does have much more horsepower than the, it's closing in on 70-ish horsepower, 67, 68, 70 horsepower, depending on how people measure that online. But you've also got more torque, especially compared to the 500 lineup, which is actually 451cc. So it's about 200cc less than the 650 that this one has. So the more torque is really kind of gives you that ability to stay in a gear and use the gear rather than having to shift all the time. But the same token, it's fun to zip through the gears. It's a high revving engine, and again, reliability is the key. You can just trust this engine to go and go and go. Now, like I said, some have 270-degree crank. This one has 180-degree crank. It can change that crank thing basically changes the sound of the bike and can change kind of the character or feel of the bike, but this one just revs up and goes. It's kind of nice to have the simplicity of that. Now, the other thing you're going to notice with this engine is it has all of your emissions components down here, and the exhaust and all that does not come up the side. It's down and underneath. So what this bike was designed to do was be a fun handling bike with street power, and all the weight is centralized. So you got about a 423, I think, pound wet weight on this bike, and that means fuel and all the things that you need in there. It's a liquid-cooled engine, that kind of thing. But what you have is a lot of centralized weight, and it feels like quite a light bike for what it is, but it gives you good street power, and really that's what it's about. You can really flog this bike on the street and not risk losing control. There was a long time this bike didn't have traction control. It does have traction control now. I don't think you need it, but it can slip out on you a little bit and dance on you a little bit. So if you want to put it in the first level traction control, you'll have that toned in. But you can have a lot of fun with this much power, and it's a great little engine for exactly that, giving you the power you need for the street and also giving you that nice handling package, nice slim package. So another big thing we should talk about with a bike like this is overall comfort. A lot of people are buying this bike as a street road bike, not a track going thing, and that's where this bike shines. Keep in mind, even if you have a little bit more power, you really have to rev to the absolute top of the rev range all the time to enjoy that power. If you're in the mid-range, which is where you're going to drive on the street, this bike will keep up absolutely just fine to those other bikes that have a little tiny bit more horsepower. So again, don't let the lack of horsepower compared to some of its 2025 competitors fool you. You're buying fun factor, not just off a spec sheet. Now, speaking of fun factor, if you want to enjoy a bike, you have to have something that's comfortable. This is not the ZX6R that you're leaned way over in, and you're going to have something that's, although better for the track, less good for the street. This is a comfortable street bike, and it has some nice upgrades over the 400. First of all, you've got a little bit more of a stretched out area. I never have any issues with my heel hitting the exhaust, which sometimes happens on the 400 or 500 cc Ninjas of the past, or currently even, of course, because that exhaust isn't there. It feels almost as light as that little or that little 500 as well. Not quite, but it does have some nimbleness to it. And you've got a little bit of wind protection here with the windshield here. Now, of course, you can always upgrade windshields. You can change shapes in aftermarket, that kind of thing. I think Kawasaki even has an extra stuff. But there's a little bit of width to the fairing here. The fairings come and take most of the wind off my legs, so you can really tuck in, feel sporty, but also stay a little bit out of the weather and that kind of thing. This is a great sport touring platform if that's what you're looking for. Now, if you're really doing a lot more touring, you can move up to the Versus 650, which shares an engine, has a little bit more adjustable suspension, taller seating position, has side bags, but this still keeps that lighter weight, lower profile profile, and the fuel tank is a little bit smaller on this, which is going to keep the overall weight of the bike low even when you've got the fuel tank full. So you've got some options here to have a lot of fun, and what I like is it's comfortable. Even in a tuck, your mirrors are in front of you by coming off these the fairing out front, and you've got a very modern look. We're going to take a look at the dash in a second. There's one more thing I want to point out though, and it's right here, and this is one of those things that makes this bike rare, but could make it really useful for yourself. So I get it, most reviews aren't talking about the rear seat, and they're certainly not showing it to you, but this rear seat is a fairly large rear seat on a sport bike, and the one trend that's happening is, doesn't matter what the class, is they're shrinking this seat or not giving it enough padding in all of the competitors. They're getting it a little bit narrower or a little bit shorter, or they make a stubby look end just for style because they're saying, hey, you're not taking a passenger that much on this bike. But the point is, if you do want to take someone on this bike, it's actually probably one of the most comfortable secondary seats on any, you know, middleweight type sport bike out there. It's just they haven't changed this in a long time, and that to me is a very good thing. You've got a lot of space here. Now, the other reason this is good is not just for a passenger. If you have this much space here, you can strap on a tail bag and actually have it not scratch your paint, and actually have a good sized tail bag and take this thing on a weekend adventure or a longer trip or just an all day type thing, instead of having to always have that tank bag. I'm not a big fan of tank bags. I always find they're a little bit in the way, whereas if you put a tail bag on here, you've got all the space you'll need, and again, you're not scratching your paint, you've got all that space for it. So whether it's a passenger or whether it's for luggage, you've got a little more space there. Now, if you do throw a passenger on here, I want to zoom in really quickly right down here. Let's flip these down. Even your passenger pegs have some rubber padding on there. So again, this isn't designed purely for the track. If it was purely designed for the track, you would take that rubber right off there. You'd make the lightest possible weight foot peg you can have. But even the passenger, as well as the rider, you have the rubber coated or rubber covered pegs there. And what that does is help smooth out the vibrations and make it enjoyable. As we take a quick glance at lighting, I want to show you this other green color here. This is the color I would buy. This is the new 2025 color. That's not the orange. Again, every color is a little bit new for this year. You've got a new KRT, you've got a new black. This one is a little bit of a green type color. It's hard to describe in person, but it's a little bit more of a metallic green. It's not going to show up perfectly on camera, but it's well worth looking at in the showroom if you have a chance to do it. What I like about this is, again, bike has been updated a little while ago, but you have full dual LED headlights, so they're both on. Back in the day when I owned my 2016 Versus, it was one halogen light, and this one would be off unless it was your high beam. Now you've got both are your regular headlights and your high beams there as well. And the other thing that's really nice is you have signal lights built into the fairing. So instead of having little stalks, again, it just classes it up a little bit, makes it look a little bit more expensive than it is by having the LED signal lights in the stalks, LED rear lights as well. So again, there's that kind of greenish color. Again, you have to kind of see it in person. Let's turn the lights off and see if we can get you a little bit better view. Maybe the camera will focus a little bit better when we do that. But it is a really nice color there that I think is well worth looking at, and to me is my favorite 2025 color. So the subtleties of the dash area and the control area on the 650 is kind of what makes this bike just really user-friendly. So keep in mind the Ninja 400 changed to the Ninja 500, and then the 500 SE has a couple features that this bike doesn't have. This still has a regular key start, so there's your sort of key there. It's in here on the tank, which frees up your display area and your handlebar area. But you don't get what the Ninja 500 SE has, which is a keyless start, sort of like a keyless enter type thing. So you can keep the key in your pocket, turn the switch as long as the key's in your pocket, and you're good to go. You don't get that in the 650. You also don't get as much connectivity or the same kind of connectivity that the 500 has, but you do have some ability to Bluetooth connect, I'm pretty sure. But the dash does show different. I haven't played with the Bluetooth connection on this one, so we'll have to make double sure on that one. But what you have here are a number of things that make it really nice. Let's start with the dash and then move to the controls, because there is definitely a reason to get this over the 500 if you're looking at some of the things in here. So first of all, let's just show you the basic dash. KTRC, the traction control, is available on this bike. Now, like I said, on a Versus 650, which is a heavier bike, I was able to get the back to step out a few times unintentionally on dry pavement. But that was because I was riding like a fool kind of thing. So if you are going to ride like a fool, but you want to keep it in control, turn your traction control to level 1 like it is right now. If you have rain coming towards you, then you're going to want to take the, where we go, you want to take the traction control to number 2, like it is right there, and select that. And if there's time to go on the track or time you just want to have some fun and you trust yourself, you can turn the traction control off. So we're going to keep it on level 1. That's basically what you would keep it on most of the time in normal weather, and you can see there. Now, odometer right there. Over here, you have a switch right here. You can, I'll show you the switch in a second, but switch controls the odometer. So you have a couple options where it says odometer. You have regular odometer, trip A, trip B, and that is it. Back to odometer. Now, just below that is actually a whole lot of information. So you have kilometers per liter is what it's showing you right now. That can be liters per 100 kilometers. That can be kilometers per liter like it is. It can be miles per gallon US, miles per gallon UK. There's lots of options, but that is showing you your instant fuel efficiency right now. So of course the bike's off and we're not moving. It's just going to show some dashes in there, but instant fuel efficiency is right there. Then you switch over to average fuel efficiency. Now ignore this number, this bike's never gone anywhere, it's just sat around. So anytime I show you something in the showroom, ignore the numbers. We'll talk about fuel efficiency when we're riding a bike like this. Then there's your range. Of course, that is calculated as you're riding. So if you ride really aggressively, it's gonna take off some range, but it can add on some range if you start riding really efficiently. So it's a guesstimate of how much you have left based on how much you've been riding. And as you can see here, when you get really low, it's not just the final bar. The final bar starts blinking, and then you end up having the orange light there blinking as well. Engine light's blinking just again because I haven't got the bike on. So we've covered range, keep going through, average speed is there, total time, and the battery at 12.3 volts right now. So that's all that's in there. The other thing is basic stuff. You have a few extra controls in here. We can show you can switch this from the black to white and the white to black. You can do things like, for instance, set the tach to start blinking, sort of like a shift light. So if you wanted to, instead of reaching 10,000 RPM at the red line, if you wanted to blink at 7,000 RPM or 8,000 RPM or whatever you want, you can set it up so the dash starts blinking at you, or the tachometer starts blinking at you at a certain RPM, and that allows you again to have that shift light so you know, hey, I want to shift to this point, or I want to be told to shift around this point. Lots of little features in here. One interesting thing, people have asked me in the past, why is there a neutral there and neutral there? I believe regulations in some countries require a separate neutral light. In other words, if the dash ever totally failed, you would still have a neutral light. That's the answer to that question. Let's look at the controls on this bike. So what we're looking at right now is the clutch lever, but you actually have an adjustment here. Both the clutch lever and the brake lever have 5 levels of adjustment. So let's just show you, it's in the 3 right now, which is where I like it. But if we set it at the 1, you can see my knuckle is sort of right there. Keep my hand in the same spot, set it to the 5, and you can see it's much further in. So it was this knuckle, and now it's, or that knuckle, now it's into this knuckle. So again, you can adjust this clutch lever wherever you want it to be. So that's important for a couple reasons. First of all, a lot of people think it's good for people with smaller hands or larger hands to fit, which is very true. It's that's part of what it's for. But this is also so that it has the grab point at exactly the point you want. So if you want the grab point to be here, you can adjust that clutch lever to where you want it, and then that clutch is really precise exactly where you want it. Same idea with the brake lever. I'm not showing you the brake lever, but if this was the brake lever, that grab point would be exactly where you want. If you want it a little closer, a little further away, you could adjust this piece on the brake lever, and that would have that grab point. So it's a good thing to have to make it really nice and adjustable. Now, while we're at this angle here, you see this little button right there? That will flash your high beams, where this one here will lock your high beams on. We're gonna take a little better look at the controls as we come in front of them and make sense of it all. All right, so that flash to pass is right back here. You can't see that anymore. Lock your high beams on, lock them on, signal, horn. Then you've got hazard lights. I think every bike in this class should have hazard lights. I don't think every bike does, so that's kind of nice to have. And then you have the select button here. So the select button in the center is you tap that, and then you move up or down to change your traction control, and then you tap it to lock the traction control back into whatever setting you have it on. But remember when I just did the odometer, it was sort of the top display, and then a lot of the fuel efficiency stuff is down here. So when I cycled through the odometer, it was odometer, trip A, trip B up there, and then when I move this, that moves the lower display. All of these controls are very simple, very intuitive. If it doesn't make sense after this video, it will definitely make sense after a couple rides. It's just really nice to have no crazy combination of scroll wheels and other stuff and deep menus. Very simple to control. Anything you would need on the ride right in this area. Now there are 2 buttons on the dash that you can adjust to deeper controls. Like I said, changing that flash point for the dash, the tachometer, you can change that within there, changing some of the colors, you can do all that. But basic controls on this side. The other side, kill switch and start switch, and that's it. Simple stuff. One final piece I wanted to show you in the dash here is a piece that I think you should just go right ahead and do either the Kawasaki accessory or find some Amazon equivalent. But this here is sort of a dummy spot where you can put a 12 volt or USB port. I do encourage you to do that, especially if you're going to sort of enjoy this bike, because that allows you to plug in whether it's your cell phone or GPS or whatever you want, and turn this into a true sports tour. Go anywhere you want, have some navigation with you, have everything set up. But I think it really makes sense to have it built into the dash. It's one of the reasons I like the Ninja over the Z models. Is it just a little bit cleaner place to put some of those things. You get a quad lock or whatever you want to do for holding your phone, and throw it in there. So simple stuff. It's just a nice feature to have. So why should you buy this bike in 2025? Well, a lot of people online, and I'm sure they're going to go in the comment section because they're not making it this far in the video, they're going to tell you, hey, XYZ bike has that 270-degree crank. They're going to say the other bike has almost 700 cc, this one's only got 650, so therefore it's better, another 30 cc better. There's other bikes that are a little bit higher than that, more cc's is better. They're going to say that that radial mount caliper is better. They're going to say all kinds of things that things are better, but, and this is what I always come down to with my reviews, are you buying a bike because you want to brag about the spec sheet, or are you buying a bike because you want to have a ton of fun for your money? And that's where this bike still shines and why it still continues to sell and sell very well. There's a lot of versions of this engine still out here in Kawasaki's lineup. If it wasn't something that brought smiles to people's faces compared to the competition, they would have updated it by now. You've got the Vulcan S on this engine, the Versus 650. You've got the Ninja and the Z. You've got the Z650 RS on this. There's a ton of bikes on this engine because it still gives the riders what they actually want, which is a ton of smiles for a good price with a good feature set that you will enjoy on the road. Just because something is better on a spec sheet doesn't mean at this class you're going to notice a difference in, for instance, braking or a 20 or 30 cc benefit with a little bit more horsepower at a certain spot in the rev range. When you're driving this around town, revving it through the gears, you're having a blast, you're faster than just about every piece of traffic out there, and this bike still handles pretty well even within its class or even above its class. So that's why this bike, I'm okay with Kawasaki not updating to a bigger engine that would cost more to purchase for us, that would cost more to insure, especially certainly in the way they do insurance in this area. This is a great bike. So if you need to buy a bike by the spec sheet or for the spec sheet, there are bikes that have a little bit better spec sheet, a little bit better things that you can brag about to your friends. But if you want to buy a bike that makes you smile, this bike still really does a good job of that. So there's my review of the 2025 Ninja 650. Like I said, we'll come back to this again. If you have questions, Wheels and Deals, Jim Gilbert's Power Sports, they're amazing at letting me come back to anything I want to come back to again and again. So if you made it this far in the video, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, because we're going to be reviewing this, all of its competitors, and everything right here on this channel, especially all the 2025s coming up very soon. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll talk to you in the next one.